During the Second World War, soldiers faced nights colder than they'd ever known. Battles fought not only against the enemy, but against frostbite, freezing mud, and bone-cutting winds. Standard-issue wool blankets quickly lost their warmth when damp, and many soldiers realized that survival depended less on what they were issued and more on what they invented. Some of the most effective battlefield insulation didn't come from fancy fabric or high-tech fibres. It came from resourceful field ingenuity that turned ordinary materials into powerful barriers against the cold. Among these forgotten creations was an insulator so effective it often replaced blankets entirely, the oil-soaked, grass-lined ground wrap. Soldiers discovered that warmth came from trapping air, not adding weight. Long before synthetic sleeping pads or reflective liners, soldiers had to think in practical physics. They discovered that insulation wasn't about how thick something was. It was about how much air it trapped and how well it stayed dry. In winter campaigns like those fought in Italy, Finland, and the Ardennes, men used whatever was available to create micro-layers of trapped air beneath and around them. Wool was good until it got wet. Once soaked, it lost nearly all its ability to retain heat. So soldiers began experimenting with layering dry natural materials such as hay, pine needles or dry grass inside oil-coated canvas or burlap sacks. This simple combination, grease, air and dry matter, formed a barrier that reflected heat back toward the body while preventing ground moisture from seeping through. Some divisions nicknamed it the field cocoon, while others referred to it as a grease wrap. Whatever the name, the principle was sound, and its warmth often exceeded that of even the thickest military blankets. Oil, grease and wax made battlefield materials waterproof. In field conditions where proper gear was scarce, soldiers scavenged any source of fat or oil they could find. Leftover cooking grease, melted tallow, even candle wax, all became part of the insulation strategy. When rubbed or brushed onto coarse fabric, like burlap or old tent canvas, these substances created a semi-waterproof outer shell. Once dry, the material was flexible, but resistant to snowmelt, rain and dew. The process was simple, but, surprisingly effective. Soldiers would hang their fabric over a fire, or maybe some hot stones to warm it up a bit, then apply melted fat or wax using a rag or just an improvised brush. The warmth allowed the grease to really soak into the fibres, creating a sort of natural sealant. Once they layered it with dry grass, straw, or even shredded newspaper inside, it formed a mat or wrap that blocked cold air from below and helped hold body warmth in. In modern survival use, the same principle can actually be replicated with materials like waxed canvas or oilcloth lined with straw or wool batting. A camper, for example, could just make a quick ground pad by spreading out a tarp, sprinkling some dry grass or pine needles on top, and folding it over once. The trapped air and organic fibres kind of mimic what those WWII soldiers did, keeping you warmer on frozen soil even if you've got very little gear. The human body's own heat was, the furnace that made this whole system work. Unlike modern sleeping bags that rely on synthetic fill to retain warmth, WWII field insulation techniques really revolved around harnessing your own body heat. Soldiers understood, that conserving energy was the difference between surviving and freezing. Once wrapped inside an oil-lined layer packed with dry material, even the faint warmth from breathing and muscle activity created a self-sustaining pocket of heat. You know, this concept, minimizing heat loss instead of just constantly trying to generate more, was absolutely essential to survival. When a soldier lay on cold ground, heat was, instantly pulled away from the body through conduction. The grass and grease method created a thermal break, blocking this transfer. And the result was insulation that stayed effective even when ambient temperatures dropped below freezing. If used today, this same principle still applies. In a survival scenario, or during cold weather camping, laying a grass-filled oilcloth pad beneath your sleeping bag will prevent ground chill. The added layer of air and natural fiber insulation often performs better than any single-layer blanket. Simplicity and resourcefulness made this method universal across armies. Interestingly, this was not limited to one military. German troops on the Eastern Front, Finnish ski units and even Soviet soldiers in dugouts used nearly identical methods. The materials differed: reindeer moss in Scandinavia, rice straw in Asia, shredded coconut husks in the Pacific, but the principle was the same: trap air, repel water, and insulate from the ground. These improvisations became so common that actually some field manuals briefly documented them under shelter-making sections. After the war, many mountaineering and cold-climate expeditions adopted similar designs in the form of oilskin ground sheets and lined bivouac sacks. What began as necessity under wartime scarcity became the foundation for modern outdoor insulation systems. For today's enthusiasts, reenactors, or even homesteaders, reviving this method can provide low-cost, renewable insulation. An old waxed canvas tarp, layered with straw and sealed along the edges, makes an excellent winter ground barrier for sheds, greenhouses, or outdoor workspaces. Even in modern emergencies, such as blackouts or heating shortages, the same logic can be used indoors by insulating floors or sleeping areas with layered cloth and trapped dry material. The forgotten insulator outperformed blankets because it attacked the real enemy: moisture. Every soldier knew that cold could be managed, but wetness was fatal. A thick blanket offered little help once soaked through. The forgotten insulator beat the cold because it solved both problems simultaneously. It stayed dry and trapped air. It was light enough to carry, easy to repair, and used materials that were always available. This is why veterans often said their best protection in the field wasn't the gear issued to them, but what they built with their own hands. Fat, fabric and dry grass may sound primitive by modern standards, but the thermal science behind it remains sound. The next time you think of winter survival, think less about high-tech coatings or expensive sleeping bags, and more about what World War II soldiers already proved. Control moisture, trap air, and the body's heat will take care of the rest. For more forgotten field techniques, battlefield ingenuity, and the survival science hidden in World War II history, remember to subscribe to Backyard Wisdom. Share this with others who value real-world knowledge drawn from those who had no choice but to get it right the first time.